welcome to ComplyPlus Presents, second episode of the year. Good to be back.
Yeah, fantastic. Strangely, it doesn't feel like it's only 2 weeks of 2025. I feel like it's been several weeks, even months.
Yeah.
For some reason,
quite an intense week this week.
Yeah, it's been. I don't think we got any reprieve at all. You come back and it's go. No one is because traditionally people used to slow down a bit, and the year sort of takes a bit of time to kick off. But this year, I feel like I've done a few months already. I don't know.
You need a holiday. You're hinting at a holiday.
I think I need one because Christmas and New Year, the festive break. Normally I chill out, but this year it was really hectic. You're hosting people, you're being invited over. Yeah, but it's good to be back. Yeah, it's good to be back. And it's good to be consistent as well. This weekly pod, I'll call it a pod now, not a podcast.
Yeah, we're trying to keep up the weekly. It's almost like a tradition now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So good to be back. Last week, obviously, we focused on myself, did a bit of a bio.
Yeah.
Talking about background, how I got into the business, just to give the viewers and the listeners a little bit more of an understanding of who we are, and then also branched into what we're doing with the business now and what my role is entailing going into 2025. So we're switching that today. I'm going to ask Richard some questions on his background, and hopefully everyone will find it very interesting and informative. So I don't know where exactly we start, but obviously you've been in business a while. Maybe we could go back to even school time. Where did you go to school? What was the education like? Give everyone a bit of a background on that.
I've never had to. Nobody's ever asked me questions in this sort of setting where it seems a bit formal, But my background is, where I am now, I sort of feel like it's been very eventful life in a way, almost a very long life. So I was born in Zimbabwe, farming family. My maternal and paternal grandparents were farmers. So, and the first 10, 11 years of my life, I lived on a farm with my grandparents. These are big farms, where they used to have a lot of cattle, sheep, goats, but they were cereal farmers, grains, maize, groundnuts, and small grains for commercial purposes. So they would huge trucks come in to collect these and take them to the city. It was quite our lives were quite sort of ingrained in that. You get up every morning, you do something on the farm. So, for example, milking the cows. Because you're going to need milk for your tea and all that stuff and whatever. Before you go to school, you do some chores. When you come back from school, you're going to do some chores. So if you ask me about fertilizers, you ask me about manure and all that sort of stuff, and even the pesticides, I knew all that because my grandfather was what was called a master farmer. You'd get Farmers Weekly whenever you go to the small town to get some supplies. You'd bring in copies of Farmers Weekly. I would read that literally end to end when I was about 6-7 years old. That was like bedtime reading.
Okay.
I moved to the city. I moved to Harare in the late 80s to finish my primary school, then go to secondary school. I went to a boys' school in Harare, a day school. I didn't want boarding school, so I went to a day school. Interesting school, quite a lot of a huge change from everything that I knew in life. I focused more on the arts initially. I wanted to be a lawyer. So I did history, I did literature, English, and Shona, our mother tongue. I couldn't get into law school after A-levels. I didn't quite make the mark because there was only one law school in the country. I wasn't good enough to get into it. So I contemplated what to do. So spent a whole year basically just hanging out with my friends, not knowing what to do. Nearly came to England in 1996, but I think I got homesick as my parents were about to pay for the ticket and I didn't come.
Okay.
I got a job instead as an accounts clerk for a big retail company with stores, credit stores and cash stores. So I got into accountancy. Somebody convinced me to do that. And then I started doing the professional qualifications. I did fairly well at the exams. You had to write exams every 6 months, and I had a pathway to become a chartered accountant. Although my job was particularly in credit control at the time, but a lot of things were interrelated. Then by the end of 1999, Zimbabwe was changing a lot, politically, economically, and a lot of young people my age and older were leaving the country, particularly for South Africa, the UK, Canada, Australia, America. And I found myself applying to come to the UK, applying to different universities. So I came in 2000. Wasn't sure what to do initially, to carry on with accountancy or do something else. Then some good family and friends guided me, to go into nursing. So I went into nursing. I was being encouraged to do mental health nursing at the time in 2001. I moved from London to come to Coventry. So I did general nursing instead, because when I went into mental health settings, I just couldn't see myself working there. It was interesting, but I just felt like, at the time for me, it felt like when I went to general hospitals, people coming in very unwell, physically unwell, unwell, then diagnosing and then treatment. I found that really fascinating. So I went into general nursing and specialized in cardiology, which I found really interesting because at the time, there were huge changes. If you had a heart attack, it was almost like a death sentence. Yeah, and if you get heart failure, you're going to die in 6 to 12 months. So treatments were changing. If you had a heart attack, you, instead of busting clothes with drugs, we could take the patient to the catheter lab. So we called it the cath lab, where people would get an angiogram, so through the groin or through the wrist, and then they go and open up the arteries that are blocked, put a stent in, flush it out, then put them on medicines, cardiac rehabilitation. So all these things happened while I was working as a very junior nurse, but you learn very quickly. You start to understand, actually, because, when treating a heart patient, the kidney is going to probably be affected. Other things are going to be affected. So you really technically become very competent and connecting things. So I found that really fascinating. And I went back to university to learn more about it, specialized more in cardiology, acute cardiac patients, people with long-term conditions. But there's a roof, especially at the time, actually, nursing, actually, the development of nurses was really not a priority at the time. A lot of nurses are just staying at band 5. When I started, actually, it was D grade, then E grade. So then they changed the banding to the pay scale that the NHS had agreed. And for me, to stay in a place I stayed there for 6 years in the end, without any clear pathway as to what I would do. But I loved the work. Then at some point, you sort of think, this is not challenging anymore. I'm not enjoying this anymore. And there's no clear pathway. So I applied to go into research instead. So around 2008, 2009, drug companies and universities were now trying to partner with NHS Trust so that they can start doing research. Because NHS is sitting on a lot of data, a lot of patients, and drug companies need to test their drugs, or they need to expand the use of their drugs. So I got a job in research. I chose to move away from cardiology, so I went into hematology, worked with the hematologists who were setting up clinical trials in partnership with drug companies and medical schools. So I was a research nurse, by title. But actually what you find very quickly is that you're doing everything. Okay. You're almost like the project manager. So you sit in feasibility meetings. So, for example, Pfizer, Daiichi Sankyo, Bristol Myers Squibb, they want to come and work with our hospital. So that's the University Hospital in Coventry. You sit in feasibility meetings to try to understand what the clinical trials for. So a lot of these were what we call double-blind clinical trials, where the patient doesn't know what drug they're taking. I don't know what drug they're taking. They're randomly allocated either this drug at this dose or that drug at that dose, or a placebo even, right? But I won't know because I need to be objective. The patient also needs to be objective. So then you bring these patients in, you're doing things like blood tests, and we had to manage all this, almost set up a little laboratory ourselves, because we can't send these blood results to the lab in the hospital. because then we'll find out that, oh, their bloods are like this. So it's easy to figure out which drug they're on. So we'd then have to, like most of our, we would run this lab ourselves. So you see the patient, you're running the clinic. You recruit the patients, you run the clinic, you manage the lab side of things, you're posting things to Scotland, to a private lab, or to Holland. You're requesting drugs, you're dealing with somebody in New Jersey or somebody in Spain. So these are multinational trials. Ukraine was huge as well. They had a lot of laboratories in Ukraine that we worked with. You go to these webinars, these workshops and seminars and conferences. So I got to travel a lot. I got to travel a lot around the UK, around Europe, meet people from South Africa, from India, from Brazil, people from all over the world. And you grow very quickly as to what you're learning. But the strange thing is I was band 6 at the time. So initially I'm band 5, junior nurse, then you get into band 6. And when you go into these meetings or these conferences, everybody else is at band 8 and above. And then you realize actually that you're doing a lot of really meaningful work, but you're not rewarded for it necessarily. I'm not talking about just financial. I'm just talking about there was no clear pathway again. Oh, we're going to set up these departments.
Again,
yes, we're going to set up these departments. You are hired as a research nurse, but you are doing everything. And then when you go to these other places, you're meeting with people, they'll have a band 8 who's in charge of the whole department, for example, or part of the department. Then the band 7s who are doing certain things, managing people and all that. So I got frustrated in a way, and because I could see clearly that I was going to struggle to grow professionally, but I was learning a lot. So I stayed there for just over 2 years. I was finishing my master's at the time. So initially I was going to do a clinical master's. But the options were very limited in around 2008, 2009 at the time. I would have gone to London University or somewhere in the north. Then one of the professors at Coventry University advised me to do a master's in leadership and management because they had a new program that they had set up. And it was more generic, almost like an MBA for healthcare and social care. Because some of the guys were coming from the social work department. So I joined. I was one of 10 students on the pilot course. I was the most junior at band 6, and everybody else was band 8, band 9. They're in charge of the ambulance service, in charge of this. So it was good to be around these people that are very experienced. You learn from them as well. But then I had to do quite a lot of free work because I wasn't in management at the time. So I had to then go and join certain projects at the hospital, work with certain professors or certain doctors who were running certain projects. One of the big ones that I got involved in was the Mid Staffordshire review after the scandal at Mid Staffordshire NHS Trust. I was still band 5 actually at the time when I got involved in that, where they wanted some junior nurses to come in to help review the documentation and as part of their recommendations then to what became the Francis report. It was quite interesting. Because I needed that for my academic work, but also I could bring in my know-how because quite often when people get higher in these systems, they forget what it's like to work on the ward. So we brought in fresh perspectives that were very useful, I believe. We got some really good feedback on the back of that. So I was trying to figure out whether I stay in research, whether I move to join a private company or I move to go and join a university, or NIHR was now offering fellowships and secondments. And then I was offered a PhD in 2010. So this was the Open University. I had another offer as well from Cranfield, School of Management. But the Cranfield one was more on general management, and the Open University, it was an engineering, mathematics and technology department. So they were looking for somebody to look at the adoption of innovations in healthcare. So I went there to sit with them, and very interesting professors. I had Professor Joyce Fortune at the time. She's now retired, emeritus professor. And Dr. Clive Severy is now at Cranfield School of Management. So both of them were coming. Clive was coming from software development. Joyce was an engineer, but she worked at Boots as director of research before she became an academic. So very experienced people, very interesting department. I didn't know much about the Open University at the time. But when you get there, you realize actually how big it is and how well funded it was, and also the generous offer that I got from my PhD as well. I was going to lose a lot of money because my salary was much higher than what they were offering me, but the opportunity was just so good, I couldn't say no. So I left University Hospital Coventry in Warwickshire in 2011 and started my PhD in September 2011. And it's quite strange because there were about 120 of us recruited that year for PhDs, and some of them were master by research, but they were on a route to a PhD. And there's 120 of you, and they're talking you through how it's going to work and the support that you're going to get. Some of them were going to do it remotely. They're coming from India, South Africa, or Europe. They're doing it part-time, but the full-time students, the university kindly allowed me to continue staying in Coventry because most of my case studies were in Coventry and Warwickshire. Okay. So there was no need for me to move to Milton Keynes, but I'd drive to Milton Keynes 2-3 times a week. They give you literally a blank page and say, look, this is what we're doing in the department. This is what we've done so far with other students that are doing this, or postgraduates, postdoctoral students, postdoctoral fellows rather. So I could have looked at adoption of technologies in the NHS, could have looked at diffusion, but I chose to look at evaluation of these technologies because there was a big gap at the time. Technology was being adopted really badly. Even the procurement of technology and software solutions for the NHS, I had worked clinically, and you realize actually sometimes they're not thinking about the user at all. They're not thinking about...
Yeah, you do experience the shortcomings.
Exactly,
well, yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I thought it was a really good opportunity for someone like me who had experienced technologies being thrown at you, and then you're expected to somehow make do of them.
Make them work, yeah.
And then on the other side, there's a patient who is not necessarily seeing the benefit, and sometimes it's slowing me down or even getting in the way completely. So that was really interesting. What's strange, like I said, is they give you literally a blank paper to say, okay, just go and
get going, basically.
Get going. And then, you're expected to read, I was reading at least 5-10 articles a week. And then I'll do a write-up every week, and then then every Tuesday, I would make sure that by 9 a.m. I send it to my supervisors. Then at 12 o'clock, every Tuesday, come rain, sunshine, I'd meet them, then we'll discuss. So I got very used to reading and synthesizing my thoughts and presenting, because then we started presenting within the department. Then if they're invited to a conference or some sort of workshop, they send you instead. And then you realize how much they're trusting you with their name, the names, the university's name. You'd go to Europe, for example. I remember one time we were in Holland, invited to a conference. And you spend 3 days literally going through the presenting, discussing, and then you come back and feedback to them. But you realize actually that they are also, these people are examiners. A lot of these people are examiners for PhD students. So what they're doing is they're grilling you along the way to get you ready to be able to defend your thesis. So I found that really rewarding. I came back to Coventry to do my data collection. So strange now, I was working at Band 5, Band 6 when I was at the hospital. Then when I come back now, I'm dealing with clinical directors. I'm dealing with the chief information officer. I'm dealing with
very, very important people.
Yeah. And that was quite... the good thing was that I was out of the hospital for a year. So completely out of the hospital. I'm not involved in the hospital at all. Then when I come back, I've had a year of preparation to come back now to be able to ask the right questions, to be able... And some of these people didn't know me on a personal level. It was funny because you'll be talking to them, you know what the data is, then they're just telling you what they think you want to hear sometimes. And you think, okay, then you change tact again. In the end, I got along with most of them. So I said, look, I've done a lot of literature review. I've looked at a lot of the data that you gave me access to. Look, I'm not out here trying to catch the hospital. I'm not an inspector. I'm not...
you're just doing your research.
I'm doing research. And the findings, actually, the recommendations that I'll make and findings will be useful to the hospital. Because my experience clinically was that no one was looking at this at all. There's no department because in the clinical governance departments at the time, they were not doing what they are doing now. They're doing more now where they're monitoring the quality, they're doing a lot of audits and things like that. So there are better structures now in the NHS. early 2010s, there was, a lot of these things were still being built.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I finished my PhD in 2014. Right, I submitted at the end of 2014, and then I had my Viva in 2015, which I passed. I didn't even realize that I passed it first time, because they're grilling you and you're going through, you sort of think, I don't know whether I got that right.
Isn't going
but
well.
when we finish, everybody's all smiles, and even the chair of the Viva committee, because they get two professors from different university, then a professor from a different department within your university. He was known as a tough examiner. And I sort of think, oh dear, how is it going to work? But then they congratulate me at the end, and I'm sort of thinking, oh, if I pass this, well, you have. Look, we liked your thesis. We liked the fact that because most of us actually have never worked in clinical environments, but we do a lot of research with the NHS, with social care. But it was really good to have somebody with your background to come in and then come and do this important piece of work, and the results are really interesting, and they'll be very useful for the university. But for anyone who is going to research in this area, this would be a good sort of piece of literature for them to take on. So they actually wanted me to add more, because we're limited to 100,000 words. So they wanted me to, we can go up to 120, 130 if you like, but we feel that you should add more information so that there's more background information on the case studies that you did. So I did that and then resubmitted, and then in the end I graduated in 2016. I went for the formal graduation in 2016. That's the background in a way to sort of say professionally what I did.
Yeah.
But when I left the NHS to start with the university as well, because I was having to do some locum work, because you're not getting enough money with the university, so you have to do 1 or 2 days a week to get extra. So part of that was one of my colleagues, Brian. We started a small consulting firm where we were originally working with the recruitment agency in the Midlands. And one of the hospitals we worked in was Warsaw and North Birmingham. So we were doing a lot of community work with the GPs, but the agencies lost their contracts, but they still wanted us to stay on. So in the end, we actually had to set up a small company so that they can pay us. But it's quite interesting work. We ended up actually turning it into a recruitment company. But with all the challenges that you face and the fact that I was also doing a full-time PhD, it was never going to work.
Yeah.
So although there were a lot of opportunities, you realize actually that, look, this is not the direction that you want to go, because to run a recruitment company full on, it needs you to be there 24/7. It needs you to be involved. The other stuff that I was doing would have suffered, or the company would have suffered. So in the end, we then decided, like when you joined us at the time, I was finishing my PhD at the time.
Yes, you were, yeah.
And we're trying to decide whether we stay on with the recruitment company. You couldn't grow it because it needed an aggressive approach. And there were a lot of big players coming in. Yes, you could sell up part of the business and move into a big company. But personally, I just didn't feel that it was aligned to the stuff that I'd done with my PhD. Stuff that I'd done with my PhD was to do with technology, assessing the need for technology, either developing it internally or hiring outsiders to come and develop it. Then you do it in an agile way where you keep evolving it and updating it as regulations change, changes to legislation, best practice. So the best way was to look at compliance, because then with compliance and governance, you could then work with health and social care organizations. Rather than going back to do a postdoctoral research or come back to the hospital, the best thing was to build a company that looks at compliance and development.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. With the background you'd got from the PhD.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's when you joined us. It was at that time where you're sort of making a decision to say, which direction do we go? And, the rest because you were now part of the business.
The journey,
Yeah.
So from the recruitment business, then into compliance business, how was that sort of transition for you and the business at the time? Obviously, you'd just finished your educational side of what you were doing. So it must have been a bit of a challenging time, and making that decision as well, yeah.
It was because recruitment is cutthroat, right? And a lot of it was changing because what big companies were doing, or people with a lot of money, it was now attracting private equity money, where people are coming in and they're bundling companies together.
Yeah.
And we had a small, almost boutique agency. The moment we took NHS contracts and prisons and all that, whatever, you are really just exposing yourself because you're spreading yourself very thinly. Some NHS trusts at the time were notorious for not paying their bills on time. You have nurses, you've got some doctors and healthcare assistants, and they need to be paid every Friday, right? So you invoice them. Some of them were taking 6 months to pay. And then some of the companies, some of the private companies and some NHS trusts were paying within the agreed timeframes. So you're basically using money from the good contracts to service all the bad contracts. And all the bad contracts were NHS trusts. I'm not going to shy from saying that because it's true. A lot of companies were struggling because some NHS trusts were just not caring about the companies that were supplying them. No. And it was like talking to a wall. So for me, I just sort of think to myself, I'm fed up of it.
Yeah.
Right. I have a lot of options as an individual. And the nurses that we had and the doctors we had, we could move them to companies that were friendly to us. So we've made sure that everyone who was working with us, we arranged to move them to companies that look after them. Then, we didn't get paid for that. We could have sold parts of the business, but I just got really fed up to sort of say, look, this is not an area that I want to work in. A lot of the stuff that was happening as well, a lot of hostile takeovers of businesses or just pushing you. You said in one of the meetings where people were...
Yeah, when I was quite new to the business.
They come from London and they're basically talking down to you. And sort of, for me, that meeting actually was the decider saying, nah, there's no way I can work with these people. I could make £1 million a year working with them, but I'd rather not.
I'd rather not do it, yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather not do it. Because there's no way I feel comfortable being part of their shop, right? We have a lot of options and we'll do things differently. So what we did is, we decided to change everything, basically shut that other company down and wind it down and start a new company that is focused on governance and compliance. And then the same companies that were trying to take us over all of a sudden need services. We were quite happy to offer them services and then they pay us what we're worth, rather than going to work with them and being part of their business. But what we realized as well was that instead of focusing on the big companies, the smaller companies were underserved. For example, if a doctor or nurse or a group of healthcare professionals set up a small clinic on Harley Street, when they were working in the NHS, they had a whole clinical governance department behind them. People looking after health and safety, people looking after patient complaints, handling complaints and concerns, a research department and all that. They didn't have that structure. So our first contract, as you know, was with One Health in Sheffield. They were still quite small at the time, but it was a group of really innovative consultants. Most of them were orthopedic guys. They set up a really good business, which went on to become much bigger. It's almost like an NHS trust now. But we worked with them. Those 4 or 5 years we worked with them. We were learning as we were going as well. But we were not just a training company to them. And they made it very clear on the first day I went there that, look, the way you're doing things is quite different to the companies that we worked with for the past 5-6 years. We like the way that you're doing things and we'll refer you to our friends. So before you know it, there's another one in Bath, there's another one in Bristol, there's another one in London. So we got to become specialist providers to the small healthcare companies, particularly yeah, that are practitioner-led. Because I could go in there and have a conversation with them, and then they're honest with you as well. They tell you where the shortcomings are. You know what they need to do to pass their next CQC inspection. So we're focusing on just getting them to get a good result with CQC, but actually a few of them went on to get outstanding, including the one in London. I can't name them, obviously, but they were in trouble, actually, of losing their commission. The commissioners didn't want to carry on the contract, and they were literally on their last legs, and we went for the first session, and long story short, we went there for 22 days within 2 months. I was getting on the train to London every other day. And we changed everything. And the good thing is they were receptive. The chair was supportive. The CEO was there. The medical director was there. All of them, the lead nurses, physiotherapists. Up to now, they're still good clients of ours. But we changed them. And the next 6 inspection, they got outstanding. And then all of a sudden, from an organization that was struggling in special measures to get them to outstanding, that then personally gave me confidence to say, hang on, we actually know what we're doing with this thing.
Yeah.
And we need to then solidify this. Yeah. So it's not just about training. We need to look at the whole compliance suite. Right?
Yeah, well, that's the point I was going to go on to, because like you say, when I joined the organisation, it was very much training focused, because that was where the demand was. That was going to be the way of making a mark in the industry and building a brand. But obviously a lot has changed since then. So that journey of, like you say, being training provider to a compliance business with software, with how was that sort of transition? And I know we're still transitioning now in a way.
Yes.
But how's that sort of journey been? And what sort of things have you learned really in the industry during that sort of transition?
Yeah, the thing is, when you look at statutory and mandatory training, of course, we had to start there because that paid the bills.
Exactly, yeah.
And it got us into organizations, right? So we got a lot of really good organizations, passionate doctors, nurses, allied health professionals who were really keen to provide excellent services, and they wanted to make sure that they meet the compliance requirements. Unfortunately, for many organizations, the NHS included as well, statutory mandatory training is a tick box exercise. But the way to look at it really is to say, look, if I'm to set up a small clinic today, or even a hospital or care home, whatever I'm setting up, it's very clear what CQC asks of you. You're going to provide regulated services. So you need to register with them. And to register with them, you need to have a clear business plan. You need to do your risk assessments, put policies and procedures in place, what training you're going to provide, how are you going to hire people. So that's the way we looked at it. But many organizations that just wanted training. So, but what we ended up doing was we would provide the training as an entry point, then start talking to them, say, hang on, even when we're doing training, you should really be measuring the results of training. How do you do that? So you start then introducing that. But the moment you do that, people think, but I don't want to pay more for my training. No. So trying to get people to understand that training is not a tick box, and training alone does not work. Just like policies and procedures alone do not work if they're sitting in a folder on the wall.
Or in a system somewhere,
It's all connected. Many organizations get it now. But then again, when you go to the diffusion of innovations, we had a good 10% that got it. Especially
our initial clients in particular.
Yeah, One Health got it straight away. And they appreciated the fact that we had the know-how of doing that, of working with their team to do that. Most of the Harley Street guys we worked with, or the equivalent of Harley Street in any city or town in England, because actually if I'm a nurse or I'm a doctor, I set up a business, I put in a lot of money into it, I don't want it to fail.
No, that's the last thing.
Exactly. And if you're coming in and they're saying to me, you've got some software solutions that will go along with the training and you help me with my policies and see things that I'm not seeing in my business, you're going to be my best friend. And you and I actually became best friends with some of those people because we helped their businesses. Some of them, we saved their businesses.
Yeah.
But the ones that didn't take it seriously, remember some of the guys just outside of London that had invested £12 million into this really beautiful business.
Luxury care homes.
Luxury care home. And they just kept changing managers. And I kept trying to explain to one of the directors that it's not the managers, it's the system. They lost their contract. They ended up shutting it down and having to sell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think they listened.
Losses,
because some of those managers, actually, I worked with them. They were good managers, but they were not getting support from the board. It's not, I think in the early 2000s, they used to say health and social care is as safe as, bricks. It's like
in terms of investment,
In terms of investment. It's not like that anymore if you ignore governance and compliance.
Yeah.
And governance and compliance are not just about training. You can't cut corners. You have to connect these things because even your staff, when you train them about, say, mental capacity, how does it link with how the organization is looking after people, supporting people? Whatever you train them in, yes, they can get a certificate, but can they go and apply it?
Yeah. Implementation, like you say, and then measuring the results after.
There you go, yeah.
So, yeah, it's almost like the business was almost adding a layer of consultancy as well, wasn't it, with that training? And I think that's why, obviously, we did manage to build a good client book, good retention rates.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, we had to go into that digital age, particularly as COVID hit as well. So, in terms of moving forward personally and professionally, where do you see the business LearnPath Systems going? And even personal goals, not just for 2025, but moving forward, how do they align with what the company are doing and what you want to do personally moving forward?
Look, digital was always going to be the way. I remember 2017, we had a meeting, actually remember the meeting where we had with people in primary care and some directors of luxury sort of care home organizations, And one of them turns around and says, well, but e-learning is not really training, is it?
Yes, that statement resonated with us for a while. Yeah.
And then you're trying to explain that it is. E-learning, blended learning actually is the solution. We were saying this before COVID to say, look, e-learning is crucial alongside the other training that you're doing. Even when you're doing, I used to do advanced life support, immediate life support when I was working clinically, depending on the role. They'll send you books to read. This is a manual on advanced life support. Then you read it for 2 weeks. Then you come in and then you write like a mini exam. Then you go for the stations, the training on the stations. You go for the station, and that's it. Then they say you pass or you failed, right? There's theory and there's practical.
Yeah.
But also when you look at blended learning, it allows the learner to learn at their pace. And even if you look at it from induction, say when you hire new people, how are you going to get them to read all the policies and procedures in 1 week? Because that's technically what a lot of people do. 5 folders, watch these 10 videos, that's your training done.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
Right? It needs to be better organized. You need to look at it from a workforce development perspective to say, look, care homes in England, what are the requirements for care homes in England, for example, or healthcare clinics in England, if you're setting up a healthcare clinic, or NHS Trust even, right? Then you structure that to meet the legislation. So that's the statutory elements. Then the mandatory elements then are what you're setting for your own organization to say, look, what are the risks within our business? Risks to staff, risks to service users, risks to visitors, but also what do we need to comply with the local authority, with the fire services, how do we work with the ambulance services, all these things matter, right? Yeah. You have to bridge that and use different sorts of learning and delivering information, including supervision and learning from accidents and incidents as well, using them as opportunities to learn. So we brought this in and where to build it into the software to say, look, if there's an incident, for example, how do you do a risk root cause analysis, for example?
Analysis, yeah.
For somebody who has never had the level of, say, training and education that we've had, how do they do it if they don't know? So you put it as part of the package to say, look, if there's an incident, do a root cause analysis, and these are the steps you need to take. This is the template that you can use. They can customize it for their own use, for example. Then they link it with their policies. We provide them with the templates of those policies, but they have to go through those templates and actually customize them for their own organization. And we give them the sort of know-how of how to customize, know-how of how to do their risk assessments properly. Because when you think about it, as a healthcare worker, a nurse or doctor, I worked in cardiology. I used to work in A&E as well. How many times do you wash your hands? I think somebody said it was about 60 times in A&E a day that you wash your hands.
Yeah.
How do you do it? Well, you get used to it. Say, before I go and do this, I'm going to wash my hands. After I finish, I'm going to wash my hands. It becomes habit. Yeah. So how do you build habits into businesses? You change the way they are working. You redesign the way they are working. You educate them. You train them. You supervise them. There are different ways to do that.
Yeah.
And I think we're a bit ahead of our time. when we were doing these things, 2017, 2018.
Yes.
And but by 2018, our key clients, we were talking to them already to say, look, you need to go blended learning. This idea of coming 3 times a year to have a room full of people and then we go through, it's not going to work.
No.
Let's do train the trainer with your organization so that we train a few people in the organization. They're already clinical leaders anyway, or care leaders. So we train them so that they can provide the practical on-the-job training.
Yeah.
Right.
So then they've got a resident person who is responsible and capable as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And for me, remember 2019, I went with my family to California. We spent Christmas in California and in Nevada. And we stayed in San Jose. And that's like the heart of Silicon Valley.
Yes.
So you go to Tesla, you go to Google, Facebook, Apple, even Zoom. Every morning when I woke up, I would open the curtains and they're looking at the Zoom building. It's very prominent in San Jose. But they let you go in. We're using Zoom in 2019. Before.
Yes, we were a subscriber.
Yeah, we're a subscriber already. And but what it does for you is it's almost like a revelation to say, God, these guys have got it figured out. All the Silicon Valley companies, tech companies, they've got it figured out. And I was even more convinced that we're going in the right direction. But then by the time we got to New Year, there was some talk of some virus in China and it's spreading, and sort of thinking, is it like SARS? Is it? I remember even when we got on the plane back from California to come back to England, I was thinking about it actually, just this seems quite different. This virus seems quite different.
Yeah. The seriousness around it. Yeah.
Exactly. But then gradually, by the time we go to March, I think we were realizing that this is a game changer.
Yeah.
By the time we got to June, July, August,
we're in the heart of it.
We were now really, the healthcare system was starting to feel the brunt of it, the social care system. And now we're talking to local authorities, we're talking to NHS England, we're talking to McDonald's, we're talking to Wix, we're talking to all these big names that would never have even talked to us before. But because we had built a lot of content, we'd built a lot of resources, we were one of the very few companies actually in England that had all these things in place. So we ended up on the NHS supplier list, we ended up on the local authorities, many local authorities supplier list, working with all these big companies that we would never even have considered to be on our radar.
No.
Schools, nurseries, ambulance services, and we had to build a lot of content very quickly. So we had to grow the team, build in the quality assurance, grow the design team, so outsource some of the work actually to get that work delivered, because you're sitting with the local authority, patients, people are dying in the community.
Yeah.
GPs can't go there to verify deaths. District nurses can't go there to confirm that the person has indeed died. So what do? Well, you convert the cost that you did for, because I think we did verification of death costs for hospices before COVID. And then all of a sudden, every care home needs that course. Well, if they've got nurses, they can do the one that we did for hospices. But if it's only carers in a local authority for domiciliary care, we have to adapt that course very quickly. It's a clinical course, but you have to adapt it so that it's suitable for carers.
Yeah.
Then the local authority, now we work with them to put a policy in place on how they are going to get support from local GPs and district nurses. So I don't remember resting at all during COVID. I'd get out for my 1 hour walk. and I'd walk around the park, because we have a park close to the house. I'll walk around the park or run, just clear my head, then come back again to my desk. I remember just continuously working, because we felt like, I think it's the closest that I would describe as a war zone for me personally, or even for the business. Everybody was hands on deck to try to solve problems. The IT guys were getting them to develop new things because the local authority needs that. Or we need to integrate with this company because they have so many clients and they've just lost connection. We even did some training for cardiologists in China and Kenya, working with some doctors from West London who they were previously training people to do echocardiography and interpret the results. And then we had to very quickly work with them to build the content, get it accredited. And then how do you link it with Zoom? How do you connect it? Oh, is Zoom allowed in China? Is it not? How do you do? So for me, it was like a blur. A lot of business, a lot of work. We hired a lot of people. And you start thinking, I don't know how long this is going to go for, but I'm kind of enjoying working like this, but it's draining at the same time.
Yeah.
It's draining at the same time. You sort of think, I just want this to end now, right? So that we can go back to some sort of
normality.
There you go. Yeah. So I don't know. Did you remember those times?
Yeah. It was good times in terms of business because obviously we were getting a lot of new business, a lot of existing customers asking for different things because, like you say, processes across the whole sector had to change. It was very chaotic, and obviously the way the business grew in terms of clients and revenue and exposure, really, it was difficult to keep up in terms of getting resource together. Whether we had to recruit new people, get more staff in to sort of realise and support the demand. But like you say, after the best part of 2 years of going through it, it was good to get back to some sort of new normality. So, I suppose really, the goals then for 2025, we're looking at obviously constantly coming up with solutions is always a big thing in our business and even our mission statement. Like you say, we're on top of a lot of the current challenges, things that are going on in the industry right now. So, I think, like you say, moving forward, they're going to be our key things for 2025. Keep coming up with usable solutions that are practical. And like you say, based on your background, you've sat on sort of both sides of the fence in a way,
It's good because finally, we're talking about that diffusion of innovations. We've broken that part now where people get it now because
it's here to stay.
Yes, it's here to stay because organizations, even no matter how small they are, they need to use technology meaningfully. They need to innovate, change the ways they're managing their business, the ways they are showing evidence of compliance. Because now there's a requirement under the CQC Single Assessment Framework to upload the evidence. We had this technology before COVID, and it was hard to sell it, to say, look, you can put your policies and procedures on ComplyPlus. Then you use ComplyPlus LMS to do your e-learning. If somebody comes in with certificates, you can upload the documents. Then you can set reminders. You can book their training. If they do classroom training in-house, we can work with you to get that content accredited and certify people. It's an all-in-one solution. But I sort of think, I was thinking of TiVo, like, did we do it wrong? So Simon Sinek talks about TiVo to say they had the best product, but they couldn't sell it. I guess it's an evolution in a way. It takes time. And when you're developing this product, it makes sense in your head as well. But actually, are people ready for it?
Yeah.
So strangely, 4 years later, 5 years later, people absolutely get it. And now we're having normal conversations where people are asking for a training management system. They're asking for a learning management system. They're asking for blended learning solutions. They're asking for policies. They know that these things can be done. And
they're needed,
Why do you need to use 5, 6, 7 systems? When you can use one system and then integrate it with the other systems
that are already in your business.
That are in your business. So you don't have to get rid of the legacy systems immediately, but what you can do is you can stagger that where you are gradually winning off. And then you train people on the use of the integrated systems, but actually make it easy. Make it easy because, for example, people use Facebook every day. They use Google every day, TikTok, whatever, all these platforms. It's plug and play. Right? It's as simple as that. I want to search something on Google. I just type in, and then as long as I put the right keywords, it's going to come up.
You're going to get a good enough answer,
Somebody was saying to me, I think it was Todd actually, who was saying TikTok for under 25s is the main search engine. I'm so thinking, God help us. Honestly, TikTok is the main search engine, but the world is changing. And if we ignore those changes, actually,
we fall behind, isn't it?
We fall behind.
Classic.
So exactly
theory.
Yeah, when you look at health and social care now, there's always a shortage of staff.
Yes.
There's always a shortage of funding.
Yes.
There's always a shortage of something, but actually, there's always a demand to provide high quality service on demand, right?
Yeah.
So part of it also is planning, so to say, workforce planning, compliance, governance. If you're failing on your governance and compliance, then you're not providing safe services. It's as simple as that. So that's the key really in 2025, to keep educating people, then keep exploring as well, sort of say, look, how can we keep evolving our product? Like, we have already had elements of artificial intelligence in our software. When we started building the original learning management system, we had a lot of, actually, we didn't call it AI at the time, but we had a lot of these functionalities that we were adding. But now I think we're going to have to be more intentional about it, right? Because even when people use large language models like ChatGPT, there's an expectation that these now need to be more available. We already build knowledge bases. We've been building knowledge bases for a while, where people can then get those solutions on demand.
On demand, ultimately. Yeah.
And now we need to consolidate that, now that it's easier to talk to people about AI. It's easier to talk to people about integrated systems. Because one of the things that I found in my research, even for the NHS, because I was looking more at the NHS only systems in the NHS, to say the biggest problem was the lack of integration. So some of the system, you actually had to log in separately from the main hospital system. They were not talking to each other.
Yeah. And
for me, that is the mission, really, particularly in health and social care, but also in education, early years, schools, how they manage, the governance and compliance side. To say, you need integrated systems. And a lot of the legacy systems that are out there, they're so outdated, even to integrate them is almost impossible. So sometimes actually people just need to phase them out. Yes. But that needs to be planned. And then for me, that is the key to sort of say, look, how do we do more of that? I remember some years ago, got a very close friend of mine asking me to say, so why did you turn out the postdoctoral positions, because you're not really using your PhD. And I sort of think to myself, I've always used it. But when you're developing a product, you have to develop a product that people want. You have to develop a product that people are willing to pay for, because we're a private company. We don't have endless funds. We have to use our money wisely.
Definitely.
Right? So for me, the disruption that came out of COVID, that chaos, and organizations realizing that they need to be better prepared for the next pandemic, even our competitors now, they quickly built their learning management systems to go alongside their face-to-face training and other things that they were doing.
Of their business.
The entry level now for learning management system is so low, right? If we were to build this company again, we'd do it quicker and cheaper, by far. And some of our competitors are causing us a lot of havoc on the market in a way, because we're incumbents. We have legacy systems that we're still winding down. We have a lot of data sitting on older parts of our system that we are gradually sort of adding to the new system. And we have to keep constantly evolving. And the way I look at it, I sort of think to myself, it's not a problem being incumbent. Even if people can copy what you're doing, but still the foresight to sort of say, look, we are looking at the big picture here.
Yeah.
We're looking at needs at national level. If we could work with the NHS and local authorities during COVID to provide solutions, that puts us in a different league altogether. So even if, for me, you sort of think, is market saturated, big competitors come in, even some of our former partners now, they've just copied our models and then basically just discard the service that you were providing. It's not just unique to us. Google does the same, Microsoft do the same, all these bigger companies do the same as well. Amazon was famous for it because they would let you sell your products on their platform. Then the moment they realize this product is selling, they just create a similar product and then they promote their product more. We've seen that with some of the partnerships that we had. And you realize, look, we are happy to stand alone. Where necessary, we work with other competitors to try to solve solutions. But I think we have a good client base where we can continue building on the legacy that we've built over the last 10 years as the business evolved. And I think the future of innovations in health and social care, in education, is brighter, because even the government now, Kestama gave a speech last week, Prime Minister gave a speech last week where he's talking about innovations, using AI in government, using AI in healthcare, but these are just buzzwords sometimes. I'm not saying he's using buzzwords, but I'm saying in practice, what does it actually mean?
Yeah,
we've spent 10 years building infrastructure that allows us to add AI sort of elements to to the software that we use continuously. But actually, when you're starting from zero, how long does it take to build the data centers? How long does it take to build the knowledge bases, the infrastructure that is needed? It's not a panacea that's going to solve all our problems. But I feel more confident that the legacy that we've built over the last 10 years is actually coming to fruition now. All the knowledge, even some of the mistakes we made, some of the contracts we lost, we've managed to get some of them back because they go somewhere else and they realize actually that, okay, maybe our tech was not exactly where it needed to be, but actually we got a lot of the infrastructure right. So for me, that is what we need to do 2025 and beyond, to continue to develop the software, improve our solutions so that we make them easy to use. Anyone can go on Google and type something. My son says, if you Googled it. So that's the sort of level that we need to get to, where it's so easy to use these software solutions, and our ComplyPlus software will keep evolving.
Okay, excellent. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for that today, and we'll be back next week to talk about a slightly different topic, but one that we're looking forward to discussing. Fantastic.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.